Testing. Okay. Good evening. I'm Artie Harris, Chair of the Montgomery County Planning Board. On behalf of my Planning Board colleagues who are here tonight, Commissioner Linden, Commissioner Hedrick, and then Commissioner Bartley in the back. Yeah. Well, it's such a pleasure to have you here. I'd like you welcome to our second installment of our three-part speaker series. We are so pleased to sponsor this series with our co-sponsor, the National Center for Smart Growth at the University of Maryland College Park. The series brings together local and national experts to explore trends, strategies, and innovations to address housing availability and affordability across the country, a crucial topic for our communities as we work to address skyrocketing prices and limited housing stock. Our conversation today will explore how jurisdictions across the nation have worked on addressing the housing crisis that not only locally we have, but nationally we have. The challenges we are facing in Montgomery County mirror the experience of cities and counties nationwide. To combat these challenges, government entities are developing and implementing solutions to meet the needs of our residents. In this session, we learn from representatives from 3 places that, like Montgomery County, are facing these issues head-on. So let's introduce our panelists. First, we will hear from Valencia Aguilar. She's a senior housing planning at Oregon's Department of Land Conservation and Development. The agency is responsible for overseeing the statewide land use program. Mari joined the Housing Division in 2022. A passionate advocate for social justice and civil rights, Mari will show how her state worked with the jurisdictions to address missing middle housing and create housing action plans. Welcome, Mari. Thank you. Our next panelist is Emma Brown. She is a senior city planner for the city of St. Paul, Minnesota, in the Department of Planning and Economic Development. Emma has worked in both public and private sector and was the project lead on the 1 to 4 unit housing study. Emma will share how she and her colleagues leverage data and consultants to look at setbacks, land standards, lot types, and more to open up single-family zones in Oregon. Welcome, Emma. Last but not least, we'll hear from Richard Tucker, a housing coordinator with our neighbor, Arlington County's Department of Community Planning, Housing, and Development. He has been with Arlington for over 20 years, working in both the planning and housing divisions, including developing the first form-based code zoning tool for Arlington. Richard will offer lessons learned from his work that has led to a transformative perspective of single-family dwellings and interesting insights on outcomes in a year into the implementation of their strategy on attainable housing. Welcome, Richard. As we listen to our experts' successes and challenges, it's important to recognize the factors that have contributed to these results. Each jurisdiction has a unique history, policies, and structures that inform its outcomes. What worked in one location may not prove effective in another, but I'm excited to hear some of the commonalities and ways we can learn from these early change leaders on how to look differently at our housing options and solutions. At the end of their presentations, we will open the conversation to the room to hear your questions and thoughts. So I'm so excited to have them because Mari brings this state level, how the state was able to provide legislation around attainable housing. And then we have our 2 local experts, Emma and Richard, who shows how their jurisdictions were able to provide legislation around this. So we're so happy. As you all know, we're going, in Montgomery County, are going through listening sessions now, the county listening sessions on attainable housing. The board presented our recommendations to the county council in June, and now they're taking this up first to listen from the community, to tell what we presented, but also hear what the community's concerns are, or what they like about the proposed plan and what they don't like about the proposed plan. There is no legislation on the table right now, as Councilmember Friedson said, but it's to listen to the community, understand what their needs are and what they like and may not like about this. And then at some point in the future, maybe this fall, maybe early next year, the county council will put some draft things out there for the community. The community will have further sessions on it where they can provide public testimony, and then they'll go from there. So thank you so much. We're going to get started now. As we listen to our experts' successes and challenges, we just want to make sure that you have a chance to listen to them. We all can learn from them. We plan to learn from here. We have many people from our planning staff here today, and we look forward to what you have to say. So let's start out with Mari, and please start us off with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and good evening, good afternoon. For my Pacific Northwest folks, good afternoon, good evening today. My name is Valencia Aguilar. I use she or they pronouns, and I am a senior housing planner with the Department of Land Conservation and Development. First, before I begin my presentation, I do want to give much appreciation to for the invitation to come today and be a panelist and take part in the speaker series. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to I look forward to the discussion and the collective learning that we'll have today. So with that, I'm just gonna jump right in by starting off with giving you kind of an overview or an outline of what I'll be talking about in my presentation. First, I'm gonna give you some nuggets to ground you in the Oregon context, talk about the statewide planning program for a little bit, and then the role that the state entity, the Department of Land Conservation and Development, plays to kind of support that statewide planning program. Then I'll talk about our middle housing regulation that is statewide, and briefly overview some of the other housing initiatives that are phase 2 from that phase 1, which was middle housing. So a lot of exciting things happening in Oregon that I'm happy to that I will be sharing with you all today. So to orient you to Oregon, first I want to offer some quick factoids. I'm sure you all know Oregon is in the Pacific Northwest. It's got amazing and incredible diverse landscapes, ranging from the rugged Pacific coast to the lush forests in the valley of the Willamette Valley, and then wide expanses of high desert on the eastern side of the state. The largest city in the state of Oregon is Portland, and it's a hub for cultural and economic activity, and it's located in the northwest corner of the state along the Willamette River. You know, with the numerous state parks and, you know, the scenic mountain ranges, the state of Oregon is a hub for recreation and tourism. We are well known for a prime destination for outdoor enthusiasts, offering activities ranging from hiking and skiing along the mountains and boating in our lakes and rivers. And with such vast, diverse landscape, Oregon is very much committed to protecting its natural beauty. So much so that in the 70s, the statewide land use program was established. This system governs land use through 19 statewide planning goals. And I won't dig into each goal, but I will say that we typically talk about the statewide land use goals in 4 different categories. Process, this is where our community engagement goal lives, for example. Resource, this is the goals that focus on protection and management of our natural resources, and all cities and counties they apply to those across the state. We've got urban goals. These are goals that really focus on urban areas. This is where our goal 10, which I'll dive into here shortly, lives. And then lastly, we have some focused goals that are specific to the Oregon coast, specifically kind of pertaining to also conservation of just the Oregon landscape, or the Oregon coastal landscape. As I noted, the birth of the statewide planning program was really founded on the focus of preserving the beauty that is available in Oregon, while also balancing development in a manner that does not impact a lot of that natural resource that we have in the state of Oregon. So at the time that the statewide planning program was established, the Department of Land Conservation and Development was also established. And really our role with the statewide planning program is to manage and regulate the program and work with various partners, primarily local jurisdictional partners across the state, to ensure they are meeting their goal obligations as required by the program. We have some key functions, including reviewing what we call PAPAs, or post-acknowledgement plan amendments, and that entails a process where, you know, cities and counties, as they're making amendments to their comprehensive plans or their land use regulations, they submit that to the state, and we review and work with local jurisdictions to ensure that those amendments are meeting the statewide planning program goals. Then we also offer guidance and resources, including technical assistance grants, to help local jurisdictions implement their planning requirements across all of the goals. And then lastly, we work very closely with the legislature to inform and develop policies related to the statewide program. This is just a quick note to say that, you know, the program exists through partnership. And on the slide here, we've got a list of the various partners that we work with. And through that partnership is the success of the program. And so collaboration is key when it comes to ensuring the success, and you know, listening and being nimble to the local realities, so that we're also responsive at the statewide level. So housing, I noted it lives in our statewide planning program within the urban category. It is specifically goal 10. This goal outlines a requirement for local governments to provide for the housing needs of all community members across the state. The graphics, the little images here that you see on this slide are the various components that local governments are required to kind of develop to meet their obligation under Goal 10. And really they are doing, at the highest level, it's a housing needs analysis that informs an action plan, or what we call a housing production strategy. These action plans are done at a 6 or 8 year ongoing cycle, and they're particularly pertaining to cities with a population of 10,000. This work is a lift, and so the legislature has a population threshold to ensure that the work is sustainable, and the ongoing funding that is allocated to the department is always prioritized to these local governments who are required to meet these obligations. That said, we also have, I'll also make a note that we also have additional funding to support local jurisdictions who still have a Goal 10 obligation, so they're still needing to meet their housing needs for their community members, and want to opt into some of these pieces, that there is a pathway for them there. So moving into our middle housing regulation, though Oregon has this goal, our Goal 10, since the beginning of the statewide planning program, we actually haven't been living up to the expectations or what is outlined in Goal 10, what I noted earlier. As noted earlier, many states across the state, including Oregon, is experiencing a housing crisis. And decades of housing underproduction and over-reliance on detached single-family zoning has led to inequitable housing outcomes that we see today. We see severe undersupply of housing, rising home prices, rising rents, decreased affordability, segregation and displacement, and many other inequitable outcomes. All that to say, too many Oregonians face high housing costs because they have inadequate housing choices. However, in 2019, just a few years ago, the Oregon legislature took it upon themselves to take a first step in addressing the housing challenges that we are seeing at the local level by adopting House Bill 2001. This is the bill that that is often referred to our middle housing bill or our housing choice bill. And it emerged from extensive engagement and kind of energy around, from across the aisle, from various perspectives around wanting to tackle the housing crisis and ensure that all community members are able to have a place to call their home that's affordable and that meets their needs. So it was a galvanization of people really interested in making sure that their neighbors are sticking around their neighborhood or ensuring that their children are able to obtain their first home. Lots of energy around that, and that moved the legislature to kind of pass the statewide regulation in 2019. And essentially what this bill established was our program requiring that cities allow middle housing types. And I think this group knows what middle housing types is, but I'll note duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, townhomes, and cottage clusters on each lot or parcel zoned for residential use that allows for the development of detached single family homes. Specifically, the bill applied to certain size communities, medium cities, and those are cities within or outside of the Portland metro area that are between 10,000 and 25,000. They were required to allow duplexes into their single-family residential zones. And then large cities that are within the Portland metro with at least a population of 1,000, but also cities that are outside the Portland metro that have a population of 25,000, at least 25,000, they were required to do the full spread of middle housing, duplexes, triplexes, quads, cottage clusters, update their codes to allow them anywhere a single-family detached residential home was allowed. And so just a quick note, too, that recently in this past legislative session, so the 2023 session, we had another bill pass, House Bill 3395, which lowered the threshold of the medium-sized cities to 2,500. So now we have more cities who are required to allow duplexes across the state of Oregon. Here is a graphic of kind of all of the cities that I just described that are implicated by our middle housing regulation. And really, this is now outdated. It says November 2019, and I just gave you that nugget that recently the legislature lowered the threshold. So there should be more triangles on here. But it gives you kind of a flavor of all the cities that are expected to allow middle housing in their communities. And our regulation or our program really is based on a direction to our department to support these jurisdictions in expanding housing choices for in their communities. And we did that through a minimum compliance standard approach. So the legislature said, help cities, and we said we will develop minimum standards for cities to comply with to allow these middle housing types. But also the legislature also allowed flexibility to these jurisdictions by enabling them to to regulate the siting and design of middle housing requirements so long as they did not cause undue or unreasonable cost or delay. So while we set the minimum standards, we developed a model code for both the medium and the large cities, and the legislature said, DLCD, do this by 2020, and medium cities and large cities update your code by 2021 and 2022, 2022 being the deadline for the large cities. With that flexibility, though, that meant local governments could take the model code that we developed, or they could develop their own so long as they met those minimum thresholds. And so as of today, what that looks like, what that means, for the state of Oregon is we've got all cities who are medium cities compliant with their requirements under the middle housing program. And we've got all large cities except for one city that is compliant with the middle housing program. That one city is the only one opting in for using the statewide model code, while every other city that is large actually met the minimum compliance, and many actually went above the minimum compliance. So it's really great to see that in the state of Oregon. A follow-up bill that I want to note here for you all is House Bill or Senate Bill 458, now codified into our statute 92.031, is a bill that enables land divisions for middle housing units, allowing property owners to divide lots so that each middle housing unit can sit on its own lot. And the intent here is to facilitate broader home ownership opportunities, making it easier to own individual lots in middle housing developments. Really, the legislature is trying, the aim there is to continue to support housing options, but through both the homeownership and rental kind of a lens. And so that's really great. Now, I think I'm going to move on into my next set of work that I'm excited to talk about, given my time, and I'm not sure where I'm at, so anyone, whomever, cut me off when I need to be cut off. So I noted earlier that middle housing regulation was step one. It was phase one. In that same year that the middle housing regulation was adopted, the legislature also passed a different bill requiring or directing my agency and a sister agency to study a methodology for calculating statewide housing need, kind of looking to the model that exists currently in the state of Oregon. And the direction from that then culminated in follow-up bills that directed our agency to take the lessons from that study and develop out policy or legislative recommendations for how to bring the statewide methodology into the Oregon context and enable, and how that would look like to shift that paradigm into Oregon, to all through the premise of trying to continue to work on housing production, housing affordability, and housing choice for the state of Oregon. And with that, whoops, give me 1 second. That culmination of a lot of studies and work that we've been doing for the last few years led to the adoption of the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis Bill. And this, now what you see here, is an updated graphic of what our Goal 10 requirements look like. So you see a little bit more of those elements on the slide, but essentially our goal has been updated to kind of orient around the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis. And what that really means is now the state will be allocating housing need across all communities. And the state is also developing resources via production targets or production dashboards to kind of measure progress, and dashboards to support local jurisdictions on by offering various data sets and across various dimensions of housing need. All that work can be inputted into the deliverables that are typically found in the Goal 10 process. So what I described was that needs analysis and then that production strategy. Ultimately, getting to that action plan where local jurisdictions are developing actions to meet their housing need that now will be allocated by the state. We've been undertaking a rulemaking process to kind of update Goal 10, and we're in the thick of it, writing rules to help bring this framework into our statewide planning program, specifically in Goal 10. But I won't go through all the various pieces because there is a lot. I will note that while this is really a partnership and an acknowledgement that the housing crisis is a state and local jurisdictional partnership. So now the state is taking on a lot of data lifts and helping local jurisdictions kind of inform that analysis that ultimately informs a localized action plan. And the next phase of that is going to be at the end, and we're doing rulemaking. The rules we're set here to develop the first phase of the rules by the end of the year. We've got a whole longer deadline for some of the other work that falls within, capacity and urbanization related items. But starting in 2025, to support that housing production strategy, we'll be developing out adoption-ready actions that local governments can essentially use as a template and bring them into their housing production strategy work and implement at the local level. We're also developing out guidebooks to help with this housing planning effort, and we're also directed to develop more model code ordinances around various housing types. And those housing types are gonna range in terms of the options available, and that's the exciting work that we get to do in here shortly around the corner. So with that, I think I'm at my time. Thank you so much. I'm not sure if we want to go to questions or...
No, we're going to go to questions at the end, but thank you so much for your presentation. It's just amazing to know how progressive the state of Oregon is and how forward-thinking and how you develop these minimal standards for attainable housing, missing middle housing, where the local jurisdictions were able to go above if they wanted to, but how there was this vision that we have a housing crisis and there are some minimum standards you have to meet. Okay, so that's actually wonderful. And then now how you're doing your housing analysis, needs analysis. We're doing a little bit. We're doing that. We've done that here, and also help to define where you need the housing within your county or within your jurisdiction. So thank you so much. And now we're turning over to Emma from St. Paul, Minnesota, and where they did it started at the local level and not at the national level. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Artie. All right, so I'm here to talk about the City of St. Paul 1 to 4 unit housing study. Was renamed to 1 to 6 because that's kind of more accurately reflects the study, where we went a little bit higher density than we had initially anticipated. All right, so a little bit about St. Paul, Minnesota. It's an urban city. It's the capital of Minnesota. It's the smaller twin of the Twin Cities, just over 300,000 population. Minneapolis is just to the west of us, right across the Mississippi River. We have a median household income of around $67,000. This is smaller than the region. 45% have a bachelor's degree or higher. We're almost 50-50 for home ownership versus renters. We're a pretty diverse city in terms of race and ethnicity. And then I also have some kind of fun facts for you all. We're the number 3 best US park system. This is behind Minneapolis and DC. Biking is a pretty big part of our culture. We're the number 4 best US city for biking. This past year, we became the first large US city to have an all-female city council, so that's pretty exciting. And then also, we are a river city. We have the most shoreline along the Mississippi River. All right, so looking into St. Paul housing types, the most dominant is single-family homes. 50% of units are in these single-family detached homes. This number has increased a little bit over the last 2 decades. And we're also experiencing some teardowns of smaller homes for, we call them McMansions, kind of a little bit larger homes, fancier homes. The greatest increase has occurred in 20 or more unit apartment buildings. These make up 31% of the units. And then these kind of middle range, 2 to 4 units, 5 to 19 units, these have been disappearing from our housing stock. 2 to 4 plexes only make up about 11% of the housing stock. All right, so looking at our low-density residential zoning, this is pre-adoption of the study, the new regulations that I'll talk about in a bit. But 72% of our residentially zoned land is zoned only for single-family detached homes. So you can see there's a ton of yellow on there, so that you can only build single-family home. The tan is the 2-family and the townhouse district, just a little bit higher density. And then dark brown is higher density multifamily, and orange is mixed use. So there were 5 one-family only zoning districts. They range in lot size and lot width. There was a 3-story, 30 feet maximum height, pretty large setbacks, minimum setbacks. And then the 2-family and townhouse district allowed either up to 2 or up to 4 units in a building. The minimum lot area per unit, this is an important number for us because this is how we measure density. So in the 2-family district, it's a 3,000 square foot amount of lot area that's required per unit. So basically 3,000 square feet times 2, that would require a 6,000 square foot lot for a duplex. And then in the townhouse district, you would need 8,000 square feet for a 4-plex. All right, some other context going on at the same time of the study. In 2021, St. Paul took a big step towards reducing barriers to development by eliminating minimum parking requirements. And then prior to that, our twin Minneapolis, our twin city, they kind of made history by eliminating single-family only zoning districts by allowing duplexes and triplexes in previously single-family only zoning districts. And so one thing that we really learned from them is that it's very important to make sure that the buildings actually fit on these lots. So they have, in some of their districts, they have 1 floor area ratio number, 0.5, and so that's kind of the box that these have to fit into. So it can be kind of difficult to fit a duplex or a triplex in this same box as a single-family home. Also, relatively slow development. In the past 2 years, there were 74 duplexes and 28 triplexes. So this helped to give us something to kind of work from. Looking at the planning process, in addition to like the typical research, department, community engagement, we also had a technical advisory committee that was made up of nonprofit and for-profit developers, architects. They really helped us learn the barriers to our current code. And then we had some amazing consultants that we had hired. One was based off, it was a team with someone based out of Minneapolis and then someone based out of Portland. And they really helped us with determining the zoning regulations that would actually allow for development to fit. So I'll be talking about that in these next couple slides here. So the consultants did a spot testing analysis where they tested how different housing types would fit on typical lots in the city with our existing zoning standards. So besides multifamily development just simply not being permitted in these districts, the minimum lot area per unit and the minimum setbacks were some of the most limiting zoning standards. So the large front and side setbacks made for too narrow of homes with awkward internal configurations. The front setbacks squished the homes back to the garage, so there wasn't much of a backyard at all. So then looking at the T2 district, this was our multifamily, mixed-use district that consultants decided to test and found that had some really good zoning regulations that helped fit these types of housing types we wanted to see. All right, they also developed these conceptual housing types. So they developed site plans for a bunch of different housing types. You can see these are just some of them. So they tested these using adjusted zoning, mostly with setbacks and kind of ignoring those density requirements that we currently had at the time. So this resulted in a lot of different numbers that we were able to use in the new zoning districts related to the minimum lot area per unit, the total building lot coverage, and then parking and paving coverage. All right, so then we had our consultants also do some financial case studies. So they tested those housing concepts and saw how they would actually work financially. So this first example is on ownership examples. So looking at the status quo side, so a starter single-family home that's affordable currently to just below median income, workforce affordability, but they are endangered and they're not being built today. New homes today are a little bit closer to this new extra large replacement home that are high income affordability. So I'm looking at a new approach where we allow for a lot more housing diversity. This would bring this case study 1. So these are new twin homes that have a sales price that's more affordable to the workforce at around 80% of AMI. And the Twin Cities AMI area median income is around $117,000 for a family of 4. Looking at case study 2, we have a new 4-plex and 6-plex. These have a $309 sales price, and if they are developed by a affordable housing developer with a subsidy, the funding gap does decrease from a 4-plex to a 6-plex, and these could be workforce affordability. So that shows that allowing for a little bit higher density kind of lowers or increases the ability to build these homes with subsidy. Looking at the rental and ownership, backyard rental with ownership options here. So this first case study 3, so this is a new 1-bedroom units and duplexes and above a garage. So 5 units total. The rents could be affordable to households and kind of modest income, 50 to 60% AMI. And then case study 4 is someone purchasing an existing single-family home and developing a double ADU. So while, of course, this double ADU, it's expensive, and that's probably even an outdated number, but it does allow for people to, median income developers or homeowners, to build this and rent that out at a modest income. All right, financial case study takeaways. So some key things that we learned. Again, that the backyard ADUs have, they do pencil out financially, and they allow for middle-income homeowners to add this to their home. For-sale development can serve in the modest income range, especially when density is permitted. Something that we learned is that the rental market was not viable for market rate developers. So in a way, this was kind of a good thing because we weren't able to show that there were going to be a ton of developers coming in because the rates of return were very low. They were not anywhere close to 15 to 18% that the market rate developers were looking for. So instead, kind of more local developers are anticipated to undertake these who really just want to improve their neighborhood. And then also the importance of by right development, because a lot of people aren't able to cover those soft costs that it takes for a rezoning to build that new development. All right, so looking at the adopted zoning changes, the new H1 and new H2 districts, the H is for housing. So previously we had 7 districts that were consolidated into 3. So I'm going to focus on the H1 and the H2. The RL is just a really teeny spot in the bottom right that's not consistently served by sewer. So we don't talk about that one too much. So H1, maximum of 4 units on a lot, regardless of the housing type. So these can be up to 4 units in one building, or 2 duplexes, or individual single-family homes. It doesn't matter. There's up to 6 with a density bonus. There's a much lower lot area per unit standard, taller heights, reduced setbacks, and then the H2 district. So this is the district for that are close 1/8 of a mile to our neighborhood nodes, and those are in our comprehensive plan. We kind of call those like an urban village of an intersection, and also near good transit. And so for us, that means light rail. We have one light rail line. We have some BRT routes, and then high frequency bus routes. So with H2, it's a maximum of 5 units permitted on a lot, up to 6 with a density bonus, and then a little bit lower lot area minimum per unit and width, and then a little bit taller heights. And then one thing that we also did was a floor area maximum for new single-family homes of 25,000 square feet. So this was to help discourage building extremely large single-family homes in these transit-supportive areas and encourage a little bit higher density. All right, so I mentioned a density bonus. So this helps to incentivize development that we want to see. So what you get with the bonus is 1 or 2 additional units permitted beyond the maximum number of units permitted. So where you would normally be able to build 4 units on a 6,250 square foot lot, you could now build 6, and that is for picking one of these options. So you could build affordable rental units at 60% of AMI, affordable ownership units at 80% of AMI, or units with 3 or more bedrooms. So this is getting at family size units that the market is currently not providing for. And then also we have an incentive to keep existing homes by retaining at least 50% of the floor area of an existing home. All right, so looking at new housing potential. So here you can see the lot size is required to be allowed a certain number of units. So the dominant district, the H1 district, most are large enough to fit 3 units, and only about half of lots are large enough to fit 4 to 6 units. And then on the H2 side, this is the transit area district. So most are large enough to have 4 units, and about 2/3 are large enough to get 5 to 6 units. So it's not like everything is going to be allowed to have 6, but we are allowing for higher density. All right, some design-related standards. The maximum heights, I talked a bit about this. These were increased to allow for, kind of reflect the more modern building technology, also allow for modular housing. So in the H1 district, it allows 2.5 to 3-story buildings, 3.5 to 3-story buildings in H2. Other standards help to improve the design and also the public realm without adding too much extra cost. So remodeling and additions to the front of a building have to be compatible with the original building. Landscaped front yards, minimizing curb cuts as much as we can. And then an entrance that's within the front third of the building, delineating elements, walkways to the street. Pretty basic stuff, but it does help to keep the public realm pretty nice. And we also have some additional lot split options. So there's new opportunity for development with much narrower lot widths, 25 to 30 feet. So making it a lot easier for someone to split up their lot if they have a big side yard that they would like to sell. They're able to do that or develop on it. Flag lots, they are already permitted, but the new standards help set expectations for access and utilities and those required connections. Example 3 there, that's a flag lot and a reverse flag lot. So reverse flag lots are now required for where there's an alley. So that allows to keep taking advantage of alleys and reducing curb cuts to the street. And then example 4, a new back lot. That's the blue lot in the back. This does not have street access, but it does have alley access. And this is any type of lot that that is paired with a reverse flag lot. We also have requirements for easements to get to utilities and emergency and pedestrian connections. All right, our progress since adoption, it's been about 9 months since this was in place. Since then, we've had an informational resource website. We have some helpful pages on there and some graphics to help explain these zoning standards. We've had at least 40 pre-application meetings, people talking about what they want to do on their lot, or they're thinking about adding to their property. That's been exciting. And then also we've had permits for 9 duplexes and 1 triplex. And then eventually, or let's see, we are currently working on an additional unit ADU guidebook to help make it easier for people who want to just add 1 unit to their lot and walking them through those steps. And then eventually we hope to have pre-approved plans that would be free for St. Paul residents to use. All right, I just have a couple development examples. So these are real examples. And let's see, so we have this back lot example. So this is a 12,000 square foot lot that someone is looking at. There's an existing home on it that's facing western, and they want to divide off the back part of their property that's along the alley. And so there is a very narrow brick alley to the south there, and this has been making for some pretty big utility issues. Basically, the sewer staff wanted utilities to go down the alley, but the water staff does not ever put water down the alley. Public Works didn't want it down the alley either, so kind of had to figure out how we would be doing this. Also, the brick made it's historic. It's in a historic district, so putting that back together would be complicated. And also, the owner, you can see in the site plan there, those 2 shaded areas. So they wanted to have 2 narrower, call them utility corridors. That's where the utilities would go to the street to connect to those properties in the back. They wanted to have 2 narrow utility corridors, but the code and staff requires 20-foot wide utility corridor, and so they had to adjust this and make for 20 feet along the alley that basically you can't build in. You have to be careful about how you plant trees. So that's really just something that is a reality in these situations. All right, then I just have one other example here. So these are 3 vacant lots. They have an alley in the back and utilities that are not on the side street, just on the main street. So the owner they originally wanted to split up into 6 different properties with 6 single-family homes. But I mentioned the 20-foot wide utility corridors that are needed. So that was not able to fit, basically, with the amount of width that we have on Aguilar there. So had to condense it down to 5 properties. And the code also requires that lots adjoin an alley when available to make use of the alleys and reduce curb cuts, but parcel B will probably need a variance. So this is something that I'm just kind of like kicking myself for making us adjoin an alley when they thought of a really good way of doing this with a side street driveway that connects to parcel A and parcel B. So that's something that we hope to change in the future. There's always room for improvement. So that's something that we're learning, and that's all I have. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Emma. It's great to see how it can work on the field level, and how all the work that goes into studies to inform your legislation. You did these test studies, and then you came up with standards, and then your design-related standards that help make sure that what you were thinking about could actually work. So thank you so much for that. And our last speaker is Richard, and Richard is our neighbor in Arlington, and it's also, people say, well, they did it, several states over. We also wanted to show how our local neighbor did it, and so we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Evening, neighbors. Good evening. So what I'm going to try and do is describe our missing middle process, which led to the expanded housing options zoning legislation in Arlington. So talk about our process, what actually was adopted, and give you a taste of, it's been operable for a year. So what have we seen in the last year? And then and maybe tell a funny story or two. Who are we as Arlington? We're right across the river. You should come visit sometime. We've got about between 230, 240,000 residents now. We're much smaller than Montgomery County, about 26,000 square miles. 26,000 miles square. 26 miles square. There you go. So then our housing costs are very high. So this is just a tabulation of average housing costs. But we do have, before I get into that, I'll just say that Arlington's very well educated, just like folks here in Montgomery County. Half the people I see in meetings are government employees or attorneys who are government employees. So we have a very educated populace. People are very involved. Our civic associations are quite strong. In the past, we've worked very closely with them. And part of our new way of working is we're trying to work with others outside of those very strong civic associations to make sure we're hearing from everyone. But looking at Arlington and its housing inventory, we've got a lot of mid and high-rise apartment buildings. Arlington is about 60% rental, about 40% to 42% ownership housing. So we've got a lot of housing that is garden style and or mid or high-rise apartments. We have about 27,000 single-family lots and not a lot in between. And I'll get into why there's not a lot in between. That missing middle is actually missing in Arlington. Those 27,000 single-family lots, about a quarter of the housing units, actually occupy about 78% of the land that is zoned for residential. So not a lot of utilization, or there could be better utilization of those areas. A phenomenon that we've seen over the last 20 years, for more than 20 years, is the tear-down phenomenon, where modest homes that were built in the 30s, 40s, 50s are being torn down and replaced with very, very large single-family houses. And people have thought about what can we do about that. That's a trend that won't change, hasn't changed over the years. And so one of the things that we did, since people are concerned about that, we thought we would harness that momentum. People are seeing change, and we said, well, why not harness that change and do something that's positive? So instead of that 5,000, 6,000, 8,000 square foot single housing unit, we can have multiple units on the same lot within the same envelope. Let's see whether that works. And we wanted to have a conversation about whether anyone was in favor of that. So our goals for the study were to increase housing supply. We all know there's a shortage of housing. Housing costs are quite high in this region. And we also wanted to diversify housing types and provide more opportunities in more areas of the county. And that's really the objective. More housing for more people in more areas of the county. Our phase one work was preceded by our pre-planning. We did this extensive research compendium, so we wanted to educate folks, and this is when the pandemic first kicked off in 2020, let people know the housing crisis and really quantify that for folks, and people understand that, and why missing middle was worth exploring, et cetera, and a lot of data and research. In fact, we had students from Virginia Tech do an analysis of our zoning history and the history of segregation in Arlington. And that was sort of part of the conversation we wanted to have with the community. Why is Arlington the way it is? Why are most communities the way they are? It's these zoning patterns that were set up way back when for specific reasons, And we're stuck with that, and that's really a challenge for us if we want to try and create more housing. So anyway, we had phase one where we're really listening to folks. So there was a lot of support for reducing housing costs. Everybody understood the challenge, but there are also concerns. If there are more people in neighborhoods, then more people will be using parks. We have a stormwater issue in Arlington, particularly when we have these severe storm events. The way Arlington was built, there used to be a lot of streams. They were piped over, built over. They are not, don't have the capacity to deal with those big storms when they come. So the water then runs overland and into your basement. So we've got a problem with that. So more development seems like a threat. We have an affinity for trees, and we have tree canopy goals. And anytime a lot is redeveloped, whether it's for single family or for missing middle, first thing to happen is the lot gets cleared. So people were concerned about that. And then just the idea of how compatible are these types of developments in neighborhoods. One of the things that we did, we hired a consultant team. We had an architectural side and we had an economic analysis side. And we wanted to see if we were to allow these missing middle type housing units on single family or typical single family lots, what would it look like? And so these illustrations show how these various things may fit within the existing setbacks, within the existing height. Would they in fact fit? And the answer to that was yes. And so and the next question was, well, if they fit, what would they sell for? Or what would they lease for? So we did that. We had our consultants look at that as well. And one of the sort of, we said this and people heard that. We said that these housing types, if they were built, they would be more affordable. What people heard was that these units would be capital A, affordable housing. And so we had a challenge trying to re-educate people as to what we really meant and what we really said, and that really dominated a lot of the conversation. And what we were saying was, if these units are built, they're more affordable than the $2 million replacement homes that we see typically when teardowns occur. And as compared to the median price or a median income in Arlington, a lot more people can afford some of these units in these various locations where none of this was allowed prior to our action. I talked before about the missing middle. One of the reasons why we don't have a lot of townhouses and what we call semi-detached, you might call them duplexes when they're side by side. In our zoning ordinance, they're labeled as semi-detached. Is because back in the 30s, there was a big push, and Arlington didn't want to be like DC, and they said, ban row houses. And so for over 30 years, you couldn't build townhouses, duplexes, you couldn't build those types of housing in Arlington, right when Arlington was really building out. So that history of zoning practice, the single family areas, the graphic on the right shows areas in yellow where single-family detached housing is the only type of development that was allowed. And then the crosshatch shows areas where over 70% of the residents are white, non-minority. So there's a close correlation there. The areas that are not crosshatched, those are the areas that are most diverse, and most particularly the Columbia Pike area, where in some of the schools there's over 50 languages spoken and all of those great things about diversity. That's not necessarily the case in other parts of the county. We did some equity analysis, just pairing all the information together. If with the status quo, you need in those yellow areas, the amount of income that a person might need to afford one of those units is $200,000. With missing middle, that affordability level comes down to approximately $100,000. So many more people would have the opportunity to afford to live in those areas if the housing were produced. So what did we adopt? In these single-family areas, single detached areas, we adopted legislation last March, to include 2 family dwellings, both duplexes, which is 1 unit on top of the other, or side by side, what we call semi-detached. A group of 3 townhouses, so not a big row of townhouses, but just 3 on a lot. And then multifamily buildings with 3 to 6 units. We studied up to 8 units, As part of the process, the board decided late in the process to limit it to just a maximum of 6 units. This applies to all of our 5 residential zones, R5, R6, R8, R10, and R20. The number corresponds to the square footage, in the thousands. So R5 lot is 5,000 square feet, and R6 lot is 6,000 square feet, and so on. Any lot that's over an acre requires a special exception, county board approval. So most of our lots are quite small. It's rare that there are lots that are an acre or more. And we still obviously allow single-family development. And one of the big things that, bugs me is when people say we eliminated single-family zoning. You can still do, and you can still live in single-family homes. It's just that you have more options now. So one of the things that we did, we set a maximum square footage for any development based on the housing type that is being pursued. This is a key thing because it encourages modest-sized housing units. There are limited cases where developers have, using the old zoning, built semi-detached duplexes or townhouses, and they've built, mega townhouses, mega semi-detached units, 4,000 or 5,000 square foot units. And so we wanted to make sure that keeping the unit size modest will keep costs down or prices down. We looked at parking requirements. We have a rich transit network, metro accessibility, and we have some high capacity bus operations as well. So if a site is located within half a mile of metro or, 3/4 of a mile from metro, half a mile from high intensity transit network, the parking requirement is 1/2 parking space per unit. And everywhere else, it's 1 parking space per unit. So that's the way, and we're seeing how that's playing out. I'll tell you how that's playing out going forward. I know there's discussion here in Montgomery County about a pattern book or some design standards. We have some design standards that we've included in the ordinance, including buildings and at least one door needs to be facing the street, so that creating that neighborhood and contributing to the neighborhood feel. Restrictions on placement of parking spaces in front of the house. So if you had a 6-plex, there shouldn't be 6 cars parked in front. There's a maximum of 2 in front. The rest need to be on the side and the back somewhere. And then screening for HVAC and garbage cans and so forth, just to be so that these things blend in a little bit more. And importantly, last thing, in terms of these design standards, the inclusion of shade trees. As I mentioned before, whether it's a single-family lot or single-family development or missing middle, the first thing that happens is the lot gets cleared. So we have a tree planting standard so that eventually there'll be some nice trees in the neighborhoods in these locations. Late in the process, people were concerned about how much of this development would occur. And so the board was persuaded to set a cap on permits to be issued each year. And this is per calendar year. So 58 permits per year. There's some magic to the number 58. I'm not quite sure what it is. But we have, looking at the map, you can see that about 2/3 of the lots are zoned for zone R6. So the majority of the permits are going to be allowed in R6, and then a smattering in the other areas as well. So we got it adopted. It was an extensive process, similar to what's going on here in Montgomery County right now. Our county board hosted a number of listening sessions. They went and sat in people's living rooms and talked with neighbors. We had some things that we did on video that the board participated in, and so we finally got there at the end, and really it was the leadership of our county board that got us over the hump. All along the way, they supported staff. They charged us with initiating the study in the beginning, and they stuck with us through the whole thing. So what have we gotten in the last year? So far, there have been 37 zoning permits issued, and we've got a smattering of different housing types. One of the concerns that we heard in the community was if you allow sixplexes, it'll be sixplexes everywhere. It'd be one bedroom, sixplexes on every lot. What we see is that early returns, there majority of the development that is proposed are actually townhouses and semi-detached. And not one bedroom, mostly two bedrooms and up. So I think we may, if these things get built, we may see the type of results that we were anticipating. So far, on those 37 permits, there are 145 units encompassing in all of that. So there's 112 net new units in these, what had been single-family detached areas. Nothing's been built yet, but we do have a couple of projects under construction. One is a duplex where it's a big house and they're gonna split it, slice it and dice it some way and create two units. And another one is a semi-detached unit that's development that's under construction. So one of the things that we adopted really early on was pre-application consultations with staff. And so zoning staff, the inspection services staff, and the engineering staff meet with applicants at their request, just so they can get the lay of the land. As we were getting into this, I was a point of contact, and people called me, homeowners asking, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. And in their minds, I could tell they thought they were just it's like adding a deck on the back of the house. And it's more complicated than that. And so these pre-application consultations have really helped to really level set people, let them understand what needs to happen. And importantly, it's important to note that the EHO permit, the zoning permit is the first permit, but there are subsequent permits that you have to get before you can, put a shovel in the dirt. So you have to get your land disturbing activity permit, your stormwater permit, and your various building permits. So that's a whole intensive process that happens even after you've gotten your EHO permit. Most of the developers are currently single-family developers, so the same companies that do the single-family, the large McMansions, they're deciding on a case-by-case basis to do this as well. There may be some, property owners that the one duplex that's being split, probably that homeowner got some professionals to help them to figure out how to do that. But that's one case where a homeowner has decided to do something. Because any development that's 3 units and up is reviewed with the commercial building code as opposed to the residential building code for single-family, townhouse, and semi-detached. It's a whole different code. Those builders that build single-family houses, they know a lot about construction, but they don't know the commercial building code. So it's been a big learning curve for them. And our building official has set up some follow-up trainings just to give them heads up on things they need to think about. Because otherwise, what really has happened over the last year is that they come in with a set of building plans and the inspectors say, no, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. And they're like, why? And then it's just this whole thing of back and forth and figuring out, well, no, because you propose to do it this way with this building material and these things are this set apart this far, well, here's what applies and this is what you have to do. And they're just learning. So a lot going on there. There was a rush in the beginning. People wanted to get in before the end of the year. They didn't know how many permits were coming in. So everyone rushed to get their stuff in, and they were incomplete, and they had to go back and do revisions. But all of that has kind of slowed down. There were probably 25 permits that were approved in the last 6 months of last year. And there's only been 12 since then in the first 6 months of this year. So all of that process has kind of slowed down a bit. And it may be for 2 reasons. One is we have been sued by some homeowners in Arlington, and that process is not completed yet. So some folks might feel like, well, we don't know how that's going to go, and I don't want to spend any more money until we know how that goes. And then it's just the sheer complexity of getting through building permits and all these other permits that need to happen. So people are kind of taking it slow, it seems. One of the things that we did at the start of the process, or when the board took action, is we did a lot of stuff online. So there's an annual report that we're actually working on. There's a lot more data that I could have shared tonight, but it's just not ready for prime time. We have a dashboard that real time people can look and see where the permits are. Has someone submitted a permit on a property on my block or in my neighborhood? They can see that, and they can see where that project is in the review process. And then all kinds of information for applicants, for homeowners. Our board was concerned that realtors and developers would just start calling people at random and try to buy their property. And so we have information for homeowners to understand what their rights and responsibilities are. And then we put a video out how to actually apply. And click this button here, and here's where you put this information here, and then you download this and put this in here, and then you have a complete application. So that it really walks you through all that. And again, our tracking, one of the big promises we made towards the end was that over the course of time, we will provide information as to how this is going. So that first annual report, our fiscal year ends June 30th. So for that first year of development activity, we're producing a report. In subsequent years, it'll have more information. A lot of it is, well, these are the applications we received. But of course, nothing's been built yet. So it'll take time for us to understand, how these developments are produced, whether for sale or for rent or what have you. Those things we'll learn in the future. But that's what we've promised to keep tabs on. I may have mentioned, I know it was on the slide, our development cap of 58 permits per year sunsets in 5 years in 2028. So we'll see when we get towards the end there, whether this is going to continue, whether there be a cap going forward, or if there's a comfort level with the level of development and the type of development that we've seen in the intervening 5 years. So that's it. That's my information up there. And if you have any questions after this, you can certainly contact me. Thanks.
Yeah, Richard, thank you so much. It's just obvious that you guys had a very thoughtful process, a lot of community engagement, lots of analysis, standards, all the things that you need to have in order to have a great process and have a great outcome. And it seems like you have some, what do you call it, boundaries where even though you put some boundaries around what you can do, that, it's like a trial period. So I really appreciate that. And so Mari, Emma, and Richard, I want to start off with a question here, and then I'll take it out to the audience. As we've been talking to residents, and even in our own lives, change is hard. Change is really hard. And I just want to know what key messaging from you, from the state level, from the local level, help to convince elected officials and residents that this was the right thing to do, because you've got it passed. So give us, from your perspective, how did you get across the finish line?
Well, I'll start. I mentioned in my presentation, we did an equity analysis, and we made that sort of central to the conversation, that the zoning pattern that we have in Arlington, and again, in most communities, it set us into what we have now, where we have people who are relatively well off living in one part of town and people who are less well off living in another part of town. And when we have a housing crisis, we want to create more housing, and then we try to decide where. Well, that's always going to be in the area where the have-nots are, right? So we got to figure out how we're going to be equitable and talk about our whole community. And talk about where the contributions can be made that are where everyone is giving a little, and so that equity conversation was central to our process. There were many people who were aligned against us. There were organized groups that had a website and had meetings and had rallies and all that stuff, but there were advocates who wanted to see change. People who are currently renters. People whose children were coming back to the community looking to buy. And so we energized them and we fed them and asked them to help us, and they did. And so at the last county board meeting, there were more advocates in support than people who were in opposition. And frankly, the folks who were in support had data and facts, and the people who were, in opposition had feelings that are real, but, the board was persuaded to listen to the folks that were in support at the end of the day.
Thank you so much. Mari, how would you answer that question from your Oregon perspective?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think what Richard just offered is relatable in the state of Oregon. I noted this in my presentation. There's a severe housing crisis in the state of Oregon, and the challenges on the ground people are facing real realities of affordability and contemplating whether they can stay in their neighborhoods or having to, find places that are affordable. So I think there was a lot of energy on the ground seeking support and solution. And then we also had key leaders at every kind of step of the government level. A big energy around that, in the same vein too, wanting to come together to start grappling with the challenge at hand and finding solutions. And then at the state level, that string was pulled all the way up there. Leaders who also are hearing their residents on the ground, community partners, advocates, developers, wanting to be part of that solution. And ultimately, it required leadership at the state level to implement this statewide regulation for middle housing. And all of that was informed by the inequitable outcomes that we see. So across all demographic groups. And so I think the biggest nugget that I might offer in terms of a success or what changed the tide is just a need for folks to come together and realizing we have to come together to help my neighbor, to help others, and move that momentum forward all the way to the top. And so working in partnership at the state level, working at the local level, and even down on the ground, there's just that energy that is helping Oregon continue to, tackle our housing crisis, not just beyond just middle housing, but all the other types of solutions that get at affordability, get at housing choice, get at fair housing choice, all these pieces so that all our community members can thrive.
Thank you so much. Emma, would you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. So I would say that we were definitely careful in our messaging. We kind of focused on, branded it as neighborhood scale housing. And so when people think about neighborhoods, a lot of our neighborhoods were already had a lot of different housing types ready. So a lot of the older neighborhoods, they already had duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, townhomes. They were less prevalent in some neighborhoods, of course, that were a little bit older, built in the 50s, but those older historic neighborhoods that a lot of people really love, we were able to point to these housing examples that we have already in the community, and that they really help make for walkable communities. And I think that people really understand, not everyone understands this, but a lot of people in St. Paul did, that that density can kind of mean more activity, it can mean more businesses, it can mean more things going on. We did have people who were against it, of course, and we also had some groups that were really for it, and they really showed up. And that was great. But I will say that the council member vote, it was like down to the wire. It was like, 3-4 that was the vote. I thought it was going to go way better, and people really were worried about developers buying up a ton of land and building a ton of rental. Maybe it wouldn't even look nice. All those kind of worries, making really poor housing quality. But we were able to show with the financial pro formas that it doesn't really make financial sense in a lot of cases to build those, and so that was really helpful for making that case too.
Yeah, I like your idea of also showing the community it's the same scale of what's in the community. So let me ask others, I don't want to dominate, I have other questions, but I'd like to, if it's anyone else in the audience, hopefully people can, this is your time to ask questions, however, whatever question you want, it's fair game. I'm sorry.
Thank you. It was really quite interesting to hear the diversity and what you all have accomplished. But I'm curious, I didn't hear you talk about the infrastructure and the costs of the infrastructure. And particularly, I'm curious about the schools. So you're bringing hopefully more children, I presume, into these areas. What about you? How is that process being managed, and was that part of your planning?
So one thing to know about Arlington, and I probably should have mentioned in the beginning, we're 26 square miles. We're totally built out. There's almost no such thing as a vacant lot. There's no subdivision to be built out beyond yonder. From border to border, we're built. Our infrastructure is mature. And so there was some analysis done by our staff, understanding that this is going to happen in a trickle over time. And so we accounted for, water, sewer impacts and so forth. That analysis was done, and we understood that. Similarly with schools, because this was going to be done piecemeal, one lot on this block, and not another one of these for 3 blocks. How can you really assess that? Is there a real strong impact? It's certainly not as great as when a 200, 300 unit apartment building is built in one location. And so it's sort of a matter of scale.
Can I ask a question? When in Arlington, if a duplex is built, are they assessed, do they have to pay impact fees, water and sewer impact fees?
No, I mean, there's a hookup fee or what have you, but it's no impact fee.
Okay, well, we're in Montgomery County, any incremental unit has to pay transportation impact fee and a school impact fee, okay.
Mr. Tucker, is the population of Arlington County, is it stable? Is it increasing or decreasing?
So we've increased over the years. We are projected to get to about 300,000 in population by 2045. Interestingly, with COVID, I think we took a little dip. We probably were at 235,000, and then we kind of dipped down a bit, but I think we're going to continue to grow over time. So
it's stable to slowly growing.
Correct.
And the demand for housing in Arlington County, how would you describe it? Stable?
It's there's a shortage of housing. There's very little residential vacancy in our multifamily developments. I don't know how to explain it. It's a tight market all the way around.
If you could, can you quantify the shortage of living units in the county?
Well, COG did an analysis of the region, and there is a need to build 300,000 housing units in the region by 2030. And this was done 4 years ago. So we're 4 years or 5 years since this analysis was done. So in the region, there's a shortage of 300,000 housing units.
Housing units. And the program that you spoke of tonight has produced how many units?
So far, there are 37 permits and about 145 units proposed.
145. And this program's been ongoing for how long?
1 year.
1 year. I'd ask the same question to the two ladies. In your communities, is your population stable? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? And Also, can you speak to the demand for housing? Is it stable or is it increasing? And how many units of each of you in your own individual programs, how many units have you produced?
Yeah, so we are projected to increase population a little bit. So I would say that it's pretty stable, but on a regional scale, I know that there's an Up for Growth report. I forget what organization does that, but I know that the Twin Cities region. So as a region, we are 80,000 units short. So not as much as Arlington, but that shows that we're an underproducing region. So where housing is needed.
How many units does your program produce?
So far, we've only been in there, it's only been out there for 9 months. We've had 9 duplexes, 1 triplex. So very, very small growth so far.
I'm not sure where you're going here, but all of these jurisdictions, and Mrs. Middle Housing has just been approved in many of these jurisdictions. But I'm not sure where you're going with this, but please tell us.
I'm only trying to identify population growth. Is there a housing increase of demand for housing? And it sounds like there is across each one of the respondents. And the question in my mind is, what's the magnitude of I wouldn't call it a problem, I'd call it a challenge. What's the magnitude of the demand for additional living units, and how successful have the programs been in meeting that need? I'm only trying to just get clear in my mind.
Want to understand, and I believe, like, when we're talking in our attainable housing, this piece is I'm sure is likely one of many pieces to create housing.
Right.
This is primarily for home ownership.
Right.
And so just like, so I'm sure you can ask them, what other types of housing are they incentivizing or do they need in their communities? But I'm just guessing that this is just one of many types, okay? Okay, so this is not the only way they produce housing in there. It's this, as we said, it's this missing middle type where people want this type, but it's just not produced in their municipalities, because the only type of housing you can put on a single-family detached lot before they made these changes was a single-family detached unit. Okay, okay, that's all. That's what I'm just. Okay, thank you. Okay. Other questions?
Yes, thanks. I have a question for the panel. This discussion and analysis is done by identifying a crisis and trying to apply an approach to identifying how to serve that need that's in crisis in an existing framework of community acceptance of urban form. And that is, that urban form has a history, legacy often of racial exclusion, and it has a pattern of denying choice to the marketplace as a whole to have accomplished that in the past. And that may not be our current feelings, but that's what we've been given and accept in the present case. I am a retired firefighter, and I've lived in Potomac with my parents, and I've progressed to a firefighter who has quite a different perspective than the privilege that I came from, both as my personal life and as seeing the way people live, because as a firefighter, I'm going into everybody's home, rich and poor, and serving them in a crisis. I see that the nature of the problem could be identified differently and in a more creative approach, and that is similar to the preamble to the charter for the Congress of the New Urbanism. And in that preamble, they frame a long list of societal, environmental, world problems, local problems, disinvestment in cities, congestion, separation of rich and poor, climate change, and so on, as one community building challenge. And I don't hear that in this discussion, both from advocates and from planners. And I think it needs to be put in this space and developed to answer the issues here. I would not, if I had a young family, I would not think it was, I would think it would be harmful. I would be very troubled myself if I moved to the place that I grew up in, because it didn't offer the kind of lifestyle that I think is beneficial to people growing up to experience, and yet it is still the paradigm for what people's aspirations. So I see the issue is as places that are exclusive and homogeneous are the places in need of multi-family housing and different choices, as much as there is a need to serve people who can't afford to live in the area. And so I don't see that discussed. That's, and my point of view finally is this change is bringing about, just as in the civil rights era, it is bringing about a sense of agency. And that agency is being widened so that even if you don't move into these neighborhoods, you now know you can. And the people who live in those neighborhoods know you can. And so there's a lot of pushback for that. And so I think the agency issue is what I learned, not in Potomac, going to Churchill High School. It's what I learned in Frostburg, in a small town, when I joined the volunteer ambulance service and set policy in monthly meetings with people that represented the picture, the Norman Rockwell picture of the four freedoms, with a man in the working man standing and speaking, and the banker sitting next to him. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you for your perspective. I appreciate it. So we have some questions in the back.
I like the idea in general of this program, but the thing that troubles me, and I think it might be different from what you're doing in Arlington, is that you're trying to move, yours is a county-wide program, correct? I mean, it can be
Yes.
anywhere in the county.
Right.
Whereas here, it's being, sort of forced in the same corridor where a lot of people already live, And so I'm worried, the traffic issue is like a real issue for me. In St. Paul, do you have a lot of alleyways and things that aren't like frontal streets for people to put their cars in?
Yeah, we do, I can't remember the percentage of alleys, of lots that are on alleys, but I think it's like at least 60 or 70%.
Well, that's a lot different than what it is here, because we have a lot of car issues here, and it looks like most of, the most focused group is where there are already a ton of cars. So, and in terms of equity, when you were showing that picture of the yellow areas and the hash areas, well, this plan is not like that at all. So I like that idea that you're having. Thank you.
Yeah, well, what we did say is that in my opening, and maybe I should have been more specific, there are some things in here that takeaways. Every area is going to be different, right? You know, like I grew up in Chicago and it's all alleys, right? And in some areas they're not alleys, but what was done here that I think all of us can do is a lot of studies and analysis, and that's one of the things we did, planning did with this pattern book. You know, you saw that none of the pieces, or very few, were alleys because we just don't have alleys. So we're working with what we have and trying to come up with ways that work. And it is what in our pattern book, all the cars have to fit, you know, where there's parking on site, right? There's parking, and there's none where there's no parking on the site. There's parking on the site. So we're making room for parking on the site. And as I said, in what we have, you can put as many you want on there, but there are some parking, right? There, you can, if you want to put more on your site, you can put more on your site. But there are some, there's a ways but the law would, as we're proposing, if council may change it, they may change the parking minimums, okay?
But then the cars get on the road. I mean, it's not just, it's not, you can park them somewhere, but then the cars end up on the road, on Georgia Avenue or wherever these corridors are that you're using.
Well-
Also, I didn't see an economic study like these other entities have done associated with the proposal in Montgomery County, just a real economic money thing.
Well, I mean, we did do some studies to see what could potentially work and what potential cost things could be like that. But everyone, as I said, everyone does everything differently, all right? You can make a comment, you want some studies, you want some, but we did lots of studies in ours to see what could fit, right? What could things could possibly cost, and we did those things. So, Mr. Next person, please.
I had a quick question about affordability. I see that a lot of what you're doing is creating affordability through increasing density of smaller units, which I applaud, because I think that is actually the secret to affordability at the end of the day. But outside of density bonuses that I heard one person mention, are there any regulations that are coupled with these to ensure that the units that are being built are actually affordable units, or are they just going to be smaller units that are really, really fancy and are still not necessarily affordable units?
So first of all, in Arlington, we don't have anything in place that ensures that they're going to be at any price. So we'll see how, what the prices are when they're built. But separately, as I mentioned, we did some analysis to determine if the units were built, what they might cost. A reaction to that was, is there something that we can do to make them capital A affordable? And so we have an announcement coming out soon about that.
Great. One other question, a different subject. Although I will say the problem is with these analysis you do of affordability is it's kind of based on what they cost and what you can do. The market ends up changing things when you get down the road, unfortunately. But I wanted to ask about your parking ratio that you had. You were saying those limits you were talking about, a half a parking space per unit. Is that a cap or a floor?
That's a floor.
Okay.
So you can build as much parking as you like, but you're going to run up against a lot coverage issue.
Right. So I'm really wondering if you put in some of these that are, I'm building some places that have much more restricted parking. I'm wondering what's going to be the unintended consequences of that you've capped parking. Are they just merging out into the streets around you or filling up otherwise? Anyway, thank you for your answer.
Yeah. So let me just say, and someone could think that way. One of the goals was to have a lower floor in areas that were close to metro, walkable downtown areas and things like. Even in my own community, as different families are coming in the community, they have less vehicles. They want to have less vehicles. They want to be in a walkable community. In many of the areas that we give parking reduction, it is a certain distance from a metro area. or other mass transit. So yes, some people want their cars, but I'm seeing anecdotally a lot of new owners, younger folks, even some older folks that are moving in the communities are only having one car. Some are having no cars. So I think the model is changing. It's not always going to be the way a car-centric, we're moving to a less of a car-centric society, right? And so there won't, I believe, and we've seen that people are having less cars, okay?
Thank you. I do have a question just to quickly note on what Chair Harris just mentioned. Like I do live in a building without parking in a small condo that is under $300,000, which you cannot find any house that does at Montgomery County. So I understand the concerns about affordability, but this is a thing that I believe helps. My question is, to anyone who wants to answer it, are there any things that you didn't do in your reforms that, whether it's because you didn't propose them initially or like proposed and compromised on, that you didn't do that you wish you did do or wish you were like more ambitious on?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we've only had it for 9 months, but just some of the actual development proposals that have come forward, we've just noticed there's some issues with utilities and with access, and we want to not make people have to get variances. I think also, I know we don't have a parking requirements, so a little bit different from the other cities, but we do have a maximum paving coverage, and that's only like 10% for alley lots and 15 for non-alley lots. And I think that is becoming an issue. People are just a little bit over on that, and its variances are difficult to get. So I think that I probably would have adjusted that number a little bit, and we definitely have the ability to do kind of a follow-up study.
I can weigh in here too. My perspective's a little bit different from my my colleagues here, who have mine is at the statewide level, and there's multiple municipalities within, and they range in various sizes and landscapes and all of the above. Middle housing was a first step, I'll say that, for the state of Oregon. It does not solve an affordability issue. We actually recognize in the state of Oregon that the housing type does not determine affordability. It's affordability, to get at affordability, there is many tools to support that. And so because we recognize that, we moved to the next phase of our work, and I acknowledge that I skimmed through it really quickly in my anxiety to be like, when I saw a 2-minute marker. But I think I want to offer this nugget to you all, as you all are kind of in the beginning of the journey where Oregon was at a few years ago, back in 2019, when we adopted a statewide regulation on middle housing. We've moved that. That's the first step. Now we're moving to change our statewide planning program around housing to support local governments in tapping into the other ways to address the housing challenge. And Oregon is in a position where our Goal 10 has requirements for each jurisdiction that goes beyond middle housing. They are doing an analysis to now it's at the state level. We're doing an analysis to determine need and allocating that need down to every jurisdiction. The jurisdiction then takes that need, contextualizes it based on their local knowledge and local data, both qualitative and quantitative, and then develop tools beyond zoning. I should have mentioned that, beyond zoning, because it's going to take tools beyond zoning, partnerships. It's going to take with various developers, both from the affordable side, capital A affordable, to the market side, because and other areas, other financial tools, things of that nature, all of which are within a jurisdictional's capacity to do. But typically, what happens is we stick to the zoning and think that's going to solve it all. And at the state of Oregon, through our program, we've acknowledged that our housing planning has to go beyond that. And so our housing production strategies, or these action plans that our local governments are developing, include tools that address affordability, that address the needs of people experiencing homelessness, that address the people at the lower end of the market, right? And earlier there was a comment about not somewhere civil rights in the intersection here. And I will say at the state of Oregon, through the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis Policy, part of that policy actually requires now that these housing production strategies affirmatively further fair housing. This was a fair housing, this principle and this mandate is part of the Civil Rights Act that recognizes exclusion and now requires an affirmative action to that. So that is also in the context of Oregon, recognizing that there are things in the past, bad housing policy of the past, that we need to address, and that potentially could have gotten us to where we're at today. But then there's that kind of outlines the inequitable outcomes that we see present day. But then there's also tools beyond zoning that matter. And at the state of Oregon, because of our program, we're positioned in a manner that recognizes that this challenge is not just at the local level, it's across various levels of government. And so we were also allocated funding to support this work for local jurisdictions. And I mentioned our middle housing regulation had model codes that would be, that any local government could just take and implement into their code. We're bringing that forward to we're taking that model and building out model codes for various adoption-ready action policies. So that could mean a permit-ready plan for a triplex that potentially has a partnership with an affordable housing developer to ensure the outcome is capital A affordable housing. One option to many of the challenges, just to give you an example. So I guess I offer those nuggets to just leave you with the moment that the housing challenge is not just, it is complex, and it's going to take multiple solutions to address the challenges. And this is a first step, and there's many, more to come, but hopefully I think at the core of it is, can we come together as a community to ensure that everyone can thrive, regardless of your income, regardless of your race, regardless of the wealth that you carry, and lean into that sense of community and what we need to kind of move forward as a collective.
Thank you so much. Please, more questions here. Board members can ask, planning staff could ask.
Thanks, Artie, and thanks to all of you for being here tonight. This has been a really interesting conversation to hear about all these different examples. One of the things that I think we've been thinking about here in this county is, we've talked a lot about like the McMansionizing of single-family homes, like that's been the pattern for a long time, and that's exacerbating the problem. This isn't part of the proposal that came out of Montgomery County, but we talked a little bit about how to make missing middle housing, attainable housing, more competitive with the kind of conventional single-family home market. And one way, of course, that you can think about doing that is comparable processes, like permitting processes, to make them streamlined and equivalent. And another way may be, of course, to sort of apply similar lot coverage or size limitations or whatever the case is, to make one pathway not any more costly or cost prohibitive than another, or whatever the case is in terms of returns that you might have. And it makes me think of, so looking at Oregon specifically, I know that in Portland, for example, when they implemented their version of what came after the 2019 bill, I think they called the residential infill project there, I believe that they did impose size restrictions on new single-family units, in addition to sort of comparable floor area ratio and coverage requirements. And what's been interesting to me to follow the Portland kind of example, and I think there's only been 1 year of data that came out of it so far, is that the majority of permitted units from 2022 to 2023, or maybe it's 21 to 22, are middle housing units. And admittedly, I haven't been following kind of countrywide to see other example, like all the other examples. Arlington's brand new. It sounds like St. Paul is kind of new too in the last 9 months. But to me, that was pretty striking. And I think there's a lot of reasons why they've had maybe some more success. I was wondering, that's just a long preamble to say, like, I'm wondering if you can speak to your thoughts on how we can make middle housing more competitive with single-family homes. So it's not only do we allow it, but how do we actually incentivize it and catalyze it so that we can see it not just kind of in a few discrete areas or a few examples here and there? Because my fear is actually that if we only see a trickle of these, not only will it not sort of make them a little bit, to your point, they're never going to be capital A affordable, but not only will it make it not like affordable at all, but if they're sort of these specialized products that only come in this neighborhood or that neighborhood, that it could actually be a little bit, it could sort of just, from a public perception standpoint, make them less appealing. So how do we make them more competitive with conventional single family? And specifically, how do we make them kind of comparable processes or even more streamlined processes? So any thoughts you can have, that'd be great. Thanks.
Well, I'll start with streamlined processes. So our missing middle, our EHO development is by right. So it's the same process whether you're building 1 unit or 4 or 6. And you jump through all the same hurdles the same. And unfortunately, the hurdles are necessary. So getting your stormwater permit, getting your land disturbance permit, some of that has to do with we're in the Chesapeake Bay region, and so we're accountable to a larger compact. And so those things have to be addressed by ordinance and by state code. And in terms of incentivizing or de-incentivizing single-family development, I think in Virginia we have less authority to do something like that. In Portland, they have that authority. Perhaps in Maryland, they have broader planning authority to do things like that, but we felt we certainly don't.
I can offer some thoughts on this one. Do want to clarify, the state of Oregon does not offer disincentives to detached single-family housing. It's actually part of our housing paradigm, and we recognize it's an important type that is needed. But I think to your question about how do we incentivize middle housing, you're getting at exactly the point that I was trying to elevate in terms of it's an option, a solution option to addressing the housing challenge. And so in the city of Portland, you are correct that actually the city of Portland, and I don't have the stats here, I'm probably, because of my seat at the state, I'm an arm's kind of distance away from the work itself and the outcomes, but from my recollection of a recent Metro regional government report, the increase in development is primarily middle housing. A lot of it has to do with the way that they incentivize middle housing. And I'll just give some examples. Before middle housing, I think there was also the allowance of ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and we rely on SDC's system development impacts to help with funding the infrastructure. The way that City of Portland, in my recollection, kind of released or had that program going for ADUs. It's allowed the ADUs, but for a certain amount of time, they eliminated the system development charges, enabling, an incentive to developers to build that sort of development. There's also, that incentive can also be applied to middle housing types to incentivize the development of middle housing that is very much a need for housing for the folks on the ground. There's other ways to incentivize middle housing and affordability. And really it's leaning on kind of like the ways in which you can work with developers to kind of meet them in their needs, but also balance the needs on the ground. So I wish I had the data to tell you. I can see the map in my mind, but the last time I saw the Portland metro region, the city of Portland, their middle housing development was primarily what increased density in that region. For very much so for the financing and the incentive base of programs that were offered to developers, affordable housing developers as well. So it's a little bit of that. It's that piece that I was talking about earlier, where it goes beyond zoning. It's getting to those pieces that help get the project to pencil, and also get the needs met of folks.
Other questions, please.
Yeah, actually speaking sort of to that point and piggybacking off what Josh said, for the beyond zoning aspects of it, when you see people building in Arlington, when you see people building in St. Paul, I wanted to see if you guys could talk maybe a little bit about, I think it was with St. Paul, you had sort of the owner occupied and splitting things to have a fee simple purchase instead of a condo association kind of thing. Or with Arlington, you're seeing, you said you were seeing the tear down market be the ones moving into this multiplex market, which I think is something that we all would expect. So when it comes to sort of financing these things and then selling for home ownership or rental afterwards, what are you seeing? What kind of things would you think would incentivize that? Where do you see your previously now single family, now multiplex developers getting their financing kind of things? Are you seeing, like, over the last 100 years, we've sort of those roads have got grass growing on them and stuff now, and we're trying to get back to the place where that's much more frictionless process, like it is to go down to Eagle Bank and get, well, now $800,000, but it's a lot. So can you speak to a little bit of that? I know it's all recent, but what have you seen on sort of the financing, the ownership, the selling, all those little pieces that sort of come after the zoning piece?
Well, we haven't seen any development completed yet, so we just don't have any understanding of any of that yet. But separately, and I kind of teased something earlier, because we are hopeful to see if there can be more affordability attained. One thing that we just released, our homeownership study that we've done in the last 2 years. And one of the goals, or one of the outcomes of that, is a recommendation to initiate a housing production fund that could be of assistance to developers who are actually providing or producing capital A affordable units. So that'll be a pilot that we'll do on a one-time basis, just to see how we can participate in the market and how we can work with either nonprofit or for-profit developers to actually achieve units that are affordable to people at 80% the median, or perhaps as high as 100%. We haven't really defined that yet.
Great. We're almost at, well, we are at 7:30. We're gonna ask one more question and then we'll wrap it up. Anyone would like to get out there the last question? Okay, yes. Last question, okay.
Thank you. I'll try and be brief here. The Housing and Affordability Index is a tool that I was introduced to in the 1990s when it was theory. I have used that as a firefighter to live in a very expensive place where I work. and that is by giving up my automobile. I've been car-free for about 30 years. I'd like to know if we can look at this issue of housing affordability as a more multidimensional issue and measure away and develop goals and measure success of increasing the opportunities for people to have less cars to afford more house. And with that comes, particularly with families with children, there is enormous pressure to move, to to transport kids after school for a variety of things, and this falls on the parents and not on the community. So maybe we need to look at the tools to share that burden, to promote the idea that people can actually live in these places where they are counting pennies.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you. You know, it's for us to learn more about what other jurisdictions are doing, and I applaud you guys for taking the lead on the state level, taking the lead, because sooner or later, folks, if I tell you, I think it's best. It's great that the state took some leadership, but I personally think it's best also as the counties, as individual counties, we define our future, right? You know, two, we have, you know, and at the local level. So we have a chance now, Montgomery County, others in Arlington did it, I mean, yeah, St. Paul did it, but it's important. It's important we have a crisis. It's important that we address this crisis. And so, and as Aller pointed out, a huge portion of wherever you are, our land is in single-family zone areas. And other folks, because that areas can expand now, because all you can build is a single-family lot on a detached lot on a single-family lot, that all that's going to happen is people either, if they redevelop their lot, all they can build is larger homes or build bigger expansions, and it doesn't allow others to come in. Montgomery County is so rich where we have the metro, the Purple Line coming, bus rapid transit coming, and by having more housing in these currently single-family detached homes, it's a greener way to live, right? It's definitely a greener way to live. So we appreciate you giving us some ideas, and there's a couple more listening sessions that the county council is having. We would like everyone to go to one if they're there, because we want to hear, the council wants to hear from people about their comments on this, what the council's putting out there now, what the board initially put out there as attainable housing. So please do go to the listening sessions, send us comments, send the county's comments, questions, and so that those can be taken into account, whatever the council does, so they can take your comments into account. So thank you so much. Thank you, our panelists. Thank you for those that came today. Thank you for the commissioner staff, the legal staff, the IT staff for helping out, not only here, but there are people online listening too. So thank you so much, and please come. We have one more session on housing from the Planning Board speaker series. It's on October 17th. And we're going to talk also about implementing successes and areas of focus in housing. Thank you so much.